But I want to officially welcome everyone. My name is Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst here at I4CP. So welcome to our latest edition of Getting Hybrid Work Right. I already recognize a lot of names and faces from folks that have been with us on a lot of these previous calls that we hold every other Thursday at the same time. But for those of you that are new, we are the Institute for Corporate Productivity, or I4CP for short. We are a human capital research firm that really focuses on discovering the people practices, HR practices of the most high-performing companies. We define high performance by looking at four pretty common metrics: revenue growth, market share, profitability, and customer satisfaction. And when we do our quantitative studies, our surveys, which we always appreciate everyone participating in, so thanks everyone on the call who's maybe participated in some of those over time. We're looking for specific practices that organizations do more often than others, and then we like to tease out what the high-performing companies are doing more often than the low, and then provide that back to our member companies and all of our reports and other content. We are a member-based organization. You see here just some of the logos. We have hundreds of members, but you see some of them here. They really range all different sizes. A lot of very large organizations, obviously, Amazon, Microsoft, Accenture, and so on. We've got some international names here. You see different industries represented. So I want to pay a special welcome to everyone on the call who's with one of our member organizations, whether your logo is displayed here or not. If you're with an organization that is not a member but might want to consider joining, please reach out to us. We'll have our email addresses at the end of the call. You can send a message to Zeta as well in the chat. Just private text her, and we can get you connected with someone that could talk about the benefits of I4CP membership. As I said, my name is Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst here at I4CP. I've been with the company for about 5 years, and I always have the pleasure of co-hosting these call series on Thursdays with our CEO and co-founder, Mr. Kevin Oakes. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Tom. And after that last intro, I was thinking, geez, you could become a salesperson any day now. It was pretty smooth.
Yeah, I've got it down. I've been here for a few years now and do a lot of these kind of call intros. So good to be with you again, though, Kevin. And I know we're looking forward to introducing our special guest today in just a moment. But a few other reminders first. As I said, this Getting Hybrid Work Right call series meets every other Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern and 8 a.m. Pacific. On alternating weeks, we focus on specific topic areas within HR. So you can see coming up next Thursday, same time, 11 a.m. Eastern, we'll have Julie Lodge Jarrett to discuss strategic HR next practices and all that they're doing at Dick's Sporting Goods. You'll see the next Getting Hybrid Work Right coming up on the 27th. We'll be focusing on talent and learning. We're still working on a guest. I know, Kevin, you're personally working on lining up a great guest for that November 3rd meeting. And then we'll be back to talking about Getting Hybrid Work Right with Jessica Noble from Hallmark on November 10th.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, a couple other things. Something else we're very much looking forward to. We have one major conference a year at I4CP where we host HR leaders, usually 400 to 500 folks in person. We've expanded it to now include a virtual component as well. And we've recently announced the first batch, and keep incrementing this by another couple of names and faces every couple of weeks. You see here some of the folks that will be our honored speakers, keynote deliverers, at our Next Practices Now conference, which this year, it's always in March, but it'll be in late March this year, March 27th through the 30th, always in Scottsdale, Arizona at the wonderful Fairmont Princess. So it'll be great to gather again. We missed a couple years because of the pandemic, but we were delighted to be back together this past March. Had a great time, and we're looking forward to that again. You can register now. People are registering. They're registering, single individuals. They're registering entire teams. We've been very happy to see some companies committing to bringing lots of their HR leaders to the conference. Anything else you want to add on this one, Kevin?
No, I know we just announced yesterday that the CHRO of PwC is also going to be one of our keynoters as well. So we're continuing to announce new speakers, on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And Zeta put the link in the chat there. So if you've been thinking about this conference, or if it's brand new news for you, you can learn all about it at the link over in the chat. As I said, we are a member-based organization. We certainly have calls like this one that are open to the public, and we do make some of our content available, usually some briefs and articles and infographics available to the broader public. But a lot of our reports and more deep dive materials are for members only. And so I did want to highlight one of those now, especially for any members that are on the call. And that's a new guidebook that we've created on talent mobility and internal talent marketplaces. It goes through, as you see there in the bottom right, the benefits of talent mobility, which are many. A lot of organizations still struggle in this area. In fact, we had some very interesting data points that it's often easier to find a job outside the company than inside the company. It's even easier for recruiters often to recruit outside the company than internally. But you see here that this covers quite a lot of ground. It's a very in-depth guidebook for our members. So if you haven't downloaded it yet and you are a member, again, Zeta put the link in the chat for you. And again, if you're not a member, just reach out to us to learn more.
And Tom is being very humble because he was really the architect behind this guidebook, but it did a wonderful job, and it's a favorite topic of mine, one that I think a number of companies need to do a little bit more in going forward.
Yeah, I can definitely emphasize thanks for that, Kevin, but the little bit more. We did a study on talent mobility back in 2016, and on some questions, when we did updated questions last year, the needle really hadn't moved on things like how often managers hoard their talent and things like that. So there's still, I would say, quite a bit of improvement that can be had here. All right, with that, I'm going to turn things over to you, Kevin. We've got a special guest here from United with us, and I'll let you kick things off.
Well, and I'm surprising the special guest with a little bit of data here. So, Tom, as you know, I do a lot of travel, and my airline of choice over the last several decades has been United Airlines. I'm a 2 million miler. I looked up my flight miles a couple days ago. It's getting close to 2.4 million miles in total. So I've spent a lot of time on the airline of our next guest, and that's Kate Gebo. And I'm thrilled that Kate is here with us, heading up HR at such an iconic organization. Kate, welcome. We're just thrilled you're joining us today.
Well, thank you so much, and I appreciate your 2 million miles. Thank you, thank you. We're at one of the airports you visit a lot, Newark Airport today. So thank you, thank you.
Yep. Kate and I were chatting before we got on here. They have a lot of employees in Newark in general, and just opened up a new club in Newark. So a lot of renovations have happened there. In fact, it's one of my favorite airports to fly through. Well, Kate, I always marvel at airlines. I think they're so complex. And it's just it's a business that is so reliant on people, but logistics that are kind of mind-blowing. And whether somebody flies once a year or, like I do, several times a month, they always seem to have an opinion about the airline. So there's no shortage of opinions out there. And so I sympathize with the job that you have had for the last 25 years and what you must go through on an everyday basis. I know you've seen a lot of change over the last couple of years, but I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about your journey in HR during that time. And you handle some areas that HR leaders don't typically handle, such as corporate real estate and labor relations with the union. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Right, and I agree with you, Kevin. Everyone has an opinion about the airlines, and that's what's so interesting about us is we've got people like you that really know how to work through an airport, and other people that are trying it for the first time, and don't know all the rules or the tips and tricks. So it is pretty complicated for sure. As you mentioned, I've been with United for 25 years. I've been in HR about 4.5 or 5 now. So I came from the business side, and as you mentioned, I did have corporate real estate under me at one point in my career, and I think everybody in HR, especially on the as we look at our corporate employees, the change in how we use facilities and how we collaborate and how our teams work, that real estate experience and the impact of facilities to our teams is so important in what we do every day. And it's actually the facilities now, the facilities and the ability to collaborate is what's bringing people in to work for that hybrid work environment. So that's a really important part of my background. I've done offices, done hangars, which are pretty cool. I've done some clubs, lots and lots of bathrooms, which are important in airports. I've also got, like you mentioned, I do have some of the things that most HR leaders would have, which would be talent acquisition, talent management, the business partners, total rewards, a lot of our HR systems. And I have a great team who at United who handles a lot of that for us. But I also do have labor relations. And so at United, with our 80,000 employees, about 8,000 of them are management employees. And the remaining, call it 70,000, are all represented by various unions. And so we actually have a pretty good relationship with all of our unions, but it's a really different time for labor negotiations in the US. We're seeing a lot of activism, a lot of companies where unions are starting up at companies, a lot of uncertainty about what union members want versus what the leadership is negotiating. So you're seeing some of that. So it's just a really different time for us, but we've spent the last couple of years really working hard on our relationship with our unions and our employees. And that's an important difference. You can have union relationships, but you also need to have that direct employee relationship. So that's something we've been really focused on.
And, you know, you've done a great job, I think, at trying to almost put into a program how you're focusing on your employee base. You've got a couple of different slogans you've been using. Every action counts is one of them. And that's the pledge that you made to employees. I think that's very complimentary to your new advertising campaign, which is Good Leads the Way, which is a very catchy, good advertising campaign. And Kate, you have a team of 500 HR professionals, if I'm not mistaken. So at a high level, just tell us what every action counts really means to you and that team. And, you know, what are some of the examples that you can share about putting that pledge into action?
Every action counts is really about how we support each other and how we support our communities. And so we are a service business. And whether you are a flight attendant or a customer service agent, you're providing service to a customer like you, Kevin. But if you're an HR, one of the HR team members, or a finance professional or marketing professional at United, your job is really to support other groups of the company. And so every action counts goes to that from the standpoint of that collaborative approach that is really important for an airline. Because as you mentioned, it is such an integrated and complex operation. Unlike maybe packaged goods or food service, if one piece of it falls apart, the flight doesn't go. Right. So much of it, that integration is really important. But it also translates, both Good Leads the Way and Every Action Counts leads to some of the work that United does outside of getting you to your next business meeting or your next or family event. We were very involved in moving vaccines at a very critical time, right? We were very involved in moving personal protective equipment during a very critical time during COVID. With the most recent, anytime there's a hurricane, we're shipping in supplies. And when I say supplies, it's everything from water to diapers to, food bars, if you will. And our team takes that that's a sense of pride for us. And that sense of pride in what we do is really what sustains the culture at United. And so the Good Leads the Way campaign is us kind of saying, hey world out there, you need to know that we're not just getting you to your business meeting or to your vacation, but we're doing a whole lot more for the good of the world.
Yeah, that's great. I can sympathize with how complex everything is. Your comment about, if one little thing breaks down, it really can affect everybody. I remember one time I was on the plane and I got upgraded. I was in first class and they didn't have any wine openers on the plane. And it was a long cross-country flight. Might have been even an international flight. And so I said to the flight attendant, hey, you know what? I've got a little wine opener in my bag, which I didn't realize I wasn't supposed to have, but it was just one of those cheap little wine openers. Somehow I get through TSA with it. They eventually caught me. But so she told me, I gave it to her. She told me afterwards, you saved first class today. So, you never know what can go wrong on a flight, but every little thing counts. And I know you hear it all the time. We're dealing with small problems. You're dealing with big problems. And over the last 2 years, Kate, you've had to deal with, a lot, as many of us have. I think a lot of people don't realize how many employees you have that work behind the scenes, right? When we think about an airline, we think about the people on the planes and, the gate agents, et cetera, but we don't think about the office workers. And I'd be curious, just in the spirit of this call from Getting Hybrid Work Right, how have you handled that over the last couple of years? And how are you handling the office workers going forward?
Well, and just like everybody else, we're figuring it out as we go, and hats off to all the HR professionals on this call. Over the past 2 years, I think that the role of HR has come front and center. And I know many of the folks on the call, like my team, have had really a career in a year. We are doing like so many things that you would do over a 10 or 15 or 20-year career, literally in a year or two. And hybrid work is one of those things. So before COVID, I was a very strong advocate for in the office. I thought in the office was really important. And right before COVID, we were working with one of our business resource groups, and it was our millennial business resource group or employee resource group, and they had put together a proposal about hybrid work. And I reluctantly took the meeting and, sat through the presentation, and it was really well thought out what they had put together. And so literally like 30, 60 days later, COVID happened, and all of a sudden we're sending everybody home. Wow. And so that it was really good to have that background from that team to help with the buy-in. But the way that we're kind of addressing hybrid work at United is I did not want to put out one policy for all of United's management team. So we have probably about 5,000 people in downtown Chicago, probably 1,000 in Houston, and another 500 or 700 in San Fran that are management employees. And it became very clear to me that a number of our leaders wanted a policy from HR that they could just point to and say, this is what we're going to do. Right. But each group is very different in the way they interact. And I also knew that if I put out a policy, nobody would be happy. So what we decided to do instead was have each group evaluate their needs based on the work that they're doing. And after we did that inventory, then we took a look and said, okay, how can we sync up teams to that are working together to be able to come in at the same times or foster some of those connections. So that's what we've been doing. But we also did ask people to designate people as either remote, fully remote, hybrid, or in office. And the fully remote team was a very, very small team. So that's probably 2% of our management team. Mm-hmm. Hybrid means that you come in up to 50% of the time. And then in the office is people who are like our network operations center, for instance, where they're routing your plane, Kevin, making sure you get where you need to go. So the vast majority of our people are classified as hybrid. And we don't keep track of who comes in and who doesn't come in. We're really managing it by outcomes. Is the work getting done? What's going on with retention? Is there a lot of churn with a group? Things like that. And so that's kind of how we're managing it.
Well, Kate, that is music to our ears, because that's really what our research has shown high-performing organizations are doing today. And yet I've been amazed at how many companies have done sort of the blanket policy, try to apply it to everybody, because you immediately create exceptions to that blanket policy when you put it in place. So I love your approach, which is really kind of a flexible approach. but it's tough sometimes. I do think people leaders, a lot of people leaders in companies, they want that air cover from HR, right? They don't want to make the decision at the ground level sometimes with their teams. They want that decision to be made for them. And so you've got that sort of yin and yang aspect to it all.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think is so important about the hybrid work versus in office work. It was easy to keep track of everything, or you think you were keeping track of everything when you were seeing who was coming into the office, right? That's one way to manage. But our managers and our leaders needed to lead differently and lead towards outcomes, which is why we made this shift. And even now we get some questions about, like, when are you going to require everybody to come in? And we're doing that. Require is I'm not sure I'm requiring. If you have a business reason to be in the office, then you need to be in the office. Now, there are some groups that require much more collaboration than others, right. And some groups that their outcomes are better when they're in the office. And so that's been really important for us.
Now, sorry, go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say there's a lot of questions coming in on the chat, so I was hoping to maybe surface a couple of those. One from Patty, because you said, and I was curious about this too, that you did some work from HR to help maybe teams understand when and how they sync up, and so say a little bit more about maybe any support that was provided or the procedure you went through to get teams to understand, okay, when can we be hybrid? When will people need to come into the office? Was it sort of just principles that you came up with, or what?
There were some principles, but it was also, we've been doing this didn't start on a specific day and work perfectly, and it still doesn't work perfectly. Let's be super clear about that. This is an evolving situation. But what we did is we did a survey of all of our officers and their teams. So that's about 60 different teams, and talked with them about, like, how are they going to be directing their teams. Some of our teams come in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Some of our teams come in 2 weeks a month. Some of our teams come in 4 days a month, right? And so what we're actually doing now is making sure that teams know when teams are going to be in the facility, so that they can then also partner at the same time. We're also using our BRGs for events, so driving events, which will drive people into our office at appropriate times. And we're making sure that people know when our executive team is there, because no surprise, that drives a lot of employee attendance when the executive team is in the office.
Yeah. And the only other question I want to surface for now, Kevin, is around metrics for productivity. What role are they playing right now as you sort of gauge, like you say, this is a work in progress. Everyone's still learning as we go. That's one reason that we call this call series Getting Hybrid Work Right, as opposed to We've Gotten Hybrid Work Right. So I'm just curious, one of the questions in the chat was around metrics. What are you tracking?
It's really our high level operational metrics, if you will, for the airline. So it's not anything new or different that we're tracking, but when your business is running well and when it's not, based on customer sat, employee sat, operational performance, and your financial performance. So we're using those. We're just using our big corporate goals, if you will. Right. We are not like doing checking badge swipes. We are not doing any audits of how much people are logging on or things like that. That goes again to the point about HR is not going to drive your hybrid, the rules for your hybrid work. You as the leader need to do that, and we're going to hold you accountable for that outcome. One thing that I do want to mention is I hear a lot from other HR leaders. They have a lot of people that are remote, and then some people that are hybrid, and then some people that are in the office. We made a very conscious decision at the executive level that the vast majority of our people were going to be hybrid, because otherwise you get into immediately all kinds of challenges about why does this person get to be remote and this person doesn't, and if you're remote, then do you get to fly into the office for a meeting, and then is your hotel covered, and things like that. And the other thing to remember is we're an airline, so a lot of our people can fly when their seats available to and from their work environment. Also, even before the hybrid work environment, about 60% of our management team was in the operation every day anyway. So a lot of our people are out and about that way too. So if I was to give any advice to other HR teams, be very careful about how you define somebody as remote, because you can't take it back. You can't. Hybrid is probably the best place to be, and then you can flex how hybrid people really are.
Yeah, I didn't think about the added complexity that you have, where people can fly so easily, and so they could be, much further away from where they need to be. So, Kate, before you put in these policies, though, I'm guessing that you probably have been polling the workforce and getting, from an employee listening standpoint, getting a lot of feedback on what the employees were looking for. Is that right?
Yeah, so we actually didn't poll our employees, but we did do a lot of listening sessions with, again, with the HR team early in the process, and then also with their various officers. And everybody has an opinion. It's kind of like airlines. Everybody has an opinion about what works for them. And what we heard the most was people really want flexibility, but they also want that connection, right? They want the ability to be able to come to the office and not be on a screen when there's 50 other people on the floor, right? So how do we drive that kind of connection? So really listening to what our employees wanted. But the other thing that I think that United has really changed is, again, we used to be very much in the office, a 9-to-5 situation, because we were a downtown location. We had a lot of people on trains, things like that. The flexibility of hours, again, has increased. It's not crazy, right? But it has moved from where it was, which I also think is a really good thing for our employees.
Well, you didn't poll your employees, but we're going to poll our audience with a couple different questions here, just around listening strategy. So we have two polls that we want people to answer. The first one is around how often are you seeking employee input? And then the second one is, how are you doing it? So when you're surveying employees, are you doing writing comments, or are you just doing Likert style or multiple choice style questions? So if we could just take a second to answer these polls around the frequency that you're asking questions, and then how are you doing it, that would be great. And Kay, while this is up, anything that you want to add to how you're doing those listening strategy sessions?
They're more local than broad-based, right?
Yeah.
And that's probably the because it is very personal to a team, which has been our strategy.
Got it. And Tom, I can't see the answers to these, so I'll let you.
Yeah, they're still coming in. While they are, let me ask one more question that came from the chat. It was actually the first one from Jamila. Going back to your first comment about pre-pandemic being such an advocate for everyone being in the office all the time, I think they were just curious a little bit more on maybe why that was, maybe a couple of learnings that you've had. You've mentioned some that you think some of the changes we've seen are a good thing, but just I think people would love to hear more.
So just like many leaders, it's because that's the way I had always done it. And I felt that the in-person interaction was so important. There is something lost in the hybrid, and that is of course, the hallway communications, or the touch, the things that just kind of come up as you're walking the hall or going to lunch with somebody, or things like that. And so finding ways to recreate those through, like at United, my team has we call it Wednesdays at Willis. And so we're trying to drive people into the office on Wednesdays to connect with others, right? Or having leadership, instead of an annual leadership conference for the company, we are going to be moving to twice a year, smaller conferences, right? To provide those kind of connections. One thing I do worry about as an HR leader is we've been able to make it over the last 2 years because of all the relationships that were put in place by in-person, being in the office in person. And how do we make sure that those relationships, and quite frankly, the stickiness of our new employees, how do they feel invested in United? That's something that we're working through right now, but that's where we're leaning on our business resource group, our employee resource groups, to help us with that connection, creating those small communities, which is, I think, really important.
Do you have a strong culture of BRGs, ERGs at United? Is that a big deal?
We really do. We really
Good.
do. We are very fortunate in that. And they do everything with, whether it's helping us with policies, as I mentioned, the hybrid environment, or LGBTQ rights, or Roe v. Wade. Our BRGs have been advising on that. But then they're also, I hesitate to throw this out, but they help us on recruiting a ton. And I'm not sure that, I don't know if other companies do that, but they are powerful on the recruiting front. And so, what you want is employees that are really proud of your company out there recruiting. And so our BRGs bring them in, and then my talent acquisition team makes sure they get in. So it's a really powerful combination.
That's a very good point. I think, sorry to interrupt, but that's a very good point. I think a lot of people by now fully realize just how powerful referrals are. But yeah, the connection that BRGs and ERGs can be an engine for more referrals is probably not known by a lot of folks. Yeah, exactly.
What we found in our research too, Kate, is they can be an engine for leaders too. It's a great feeding ground for leadership development, we've seen that across many different organizations. I'd be curious, how many BRGs do you have roughly?
We have 8 BRGs, and about 25,000 of our employees out of our 80,000 employees are engaged in our business resource groups. And your comment about leadership, we have had probably 5 or 6 of our BRG leaders become officers of United. And that was because of their leadership of, not their leadership of the BRGs and their knowledge of the function, but really being those, leading a BRG, you're leading, that informal leadership is really important.
Yeah, excellent. Well, Tom, so I guess we've got the poll results. We've had them up here for a little while. As I look at them, it's sort of a good and bad. And I'd be curious what you and Kate think about some of these results.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing still a large number of companies only once or twice a year in terms of frequency. So I would put that maybe in the bad bucket. Better to see more doing more frequent, I suppose.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't say bad, but room for improvement. Our research shows more frequent listening certainly helps the organization overall.
And then for the second question on the practices. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kate.
Just on that point, Kevin, one thing that we have found is everybody's really nervous about the hybrid work, that a company is going to pull it back. And they're always looking for reassurance that it's going to stay. And I just wonder if more questions about the hybrid environment will just cause more questions about it, as opposed to providing some certainty with employees. So that might be part of what you're seeing there. That's what I get concerned about asking about it, because it's such it's a shift for us at United, but I'm worried people think that, they're waiting for an announcement, that something's going to change.
And you also need to back up your surveys with actual changes, with action. Otherwise, survey fatigue will set in, and people will be very skeptical about participating. So if you're not in a position to act on the results of the surveys, then more frequent can be a negative thing. On the second question about how you analyze particularly open answer data, was interesting to see over a quarter using sort of modern technology, AI, machine learning technology, natural language processing to analyze writing comments. Obviously, not everyone has those capabilities and still have to do it manually or avoid open answer altogether because it is a labor to do. But interesting to see that we're over a quarter there.
Yeah, for sure. And to Bethany's comment in the chat here, you can blame me for that, Bethany. You're right. We probably should have had another option here of doing it, a few times a year versus the ones we gave you. But thank you to everybody who put in those comments. We appreciate it. Kate, let's go back to something you were touching on just a second ago, and that's what we've seen in a lot of organizations. You can sometimes have an environment of haves and have-nots, if you will, in this hybrid discussion. You have so many essential workers in your organization that don't necessarily have that flexibility to be hybrid, but I know you've been working on giving them aspects of flexibility. So talk a little bit about what you've been doing with those essential workers.
So we have been primarily a very full-time operation is how we would hire and bring on people. And so offering options of more part-time in the workforce has been something that's really important for our team. And also, in the aviation industry, I'm sure you've seen some of the challenges the industry has been having over the summer as we've been hiring up. United just hired 15,000 people this year across all of our frontline teams. And we'll be hiring another 15,000 people next year. And that is, we are over hiring for our needs. And so it's allowing people flexibility on where they would have normally have had to work a 32 or 40-hour work week, being able to take additional time off. Now it's unpaid. They do have vacation time, but being able to offer those options of flexibility for authorized time off without pay is really important to a lot of our work groups, our flight attendants, some of our customer service agents. That flexibility is really important to them. The folks that, the baggage folks and the maintenance technicians, that's less important to them, quite frankly. So they're pretty much full-time folks.
And I know we've on this call series talked a lot about working parents and how companies have been shifting, how they think about giving more flexibility for those parents. Has that been something you've been looking at as well, Kate?
So on the parent side, what I would say, there's not a lot we can do with our frontline team because of our union, our union representation. But our CEO actually has 3 kids under the age of 8. And so from a corporate approach, his kids pop in and off calls all the time, which is just fantastic.
That's great.
And it really has lightened up the culture. And it also, I think, makes our teams, when you're inviting somebody into your house, quite frankly, and you're getting to know their kids and their family, that's another really good way for leaders to really connect with their teams. And because we're more than just what we are at work. And so from a culture perspective, us really engaging with the families in that way has been really, really good.
Kate, one of the things that you shared with me when we were doing prep for this call was one of your other BRGs that I don't think a lot of organizations have. A lot of folks have women's BRG or racial-based BRGs, but you have a millennial-based BRG, and it sounded like that one played a role in developing some of the principles and policies around flexible work.
Yeah, they absolutely did. They were doing some consulting work for us and pitching the way that we should think about remote work versus hybrid work versus in-person work. They actually created a guidebook for managers on how to manage remote work, what types of things, whether you have 4 hours or flex hours, really managing the outcomes as opposed to hours work, that type of thing. So that's been one of the ways that our BRGs have really helped us in this hybrid work environment. We also have a working parents BRG. I don't know if other companies have that, but that's one that we've just recently added. And that's become another interesting thing about United. Previously, it wasn't okay for you to not be available from 8 to 9 for a call. Now it's completely normal for you to be taking that call as you're doing the school pickup or drop off, and that's a really, really good thing. Parents appreciate it. The work is getting done, which is great. And it's something that I think has really been good for us.
Kate, just sort of shifting gears a little bit towards the in-office experience and the employee experience in office. I know we said earlier you've had a lot of oversight of corporate real estate, and you've done some things to change your real estate overall, and you've supplied some great photos for us. So I'll let you walk through some of what you've been doing.
Yeah, so like many of the folks on the phone or on the line today, we have taken the opportunity to move, create more areas of collaboration and not just conference rooms. So here you're seeing we've got 2 floors that are just kind of like gathering space. You don't need a conference room table necessarily to have a good meeting and have some great innovation. And so this is some of the examples of some of our collaboration spaces. This is also where we do some of our big employee meetings and things like that, just a place to gather. And as I mentioned before, those hallway conversations can really happen in this space in a way that our previous structure of 10 or 11 floors at Willis Tower, also known as the Sears Tower in Chicago,
Right.
you may only see the people on your floor. This allows you to be able to integrate in with and see people from literally all different parts of the company. Usually there's more people than what's in these pictures, but these are real estate pictures, so we wanted to show off the pictures, the furniture.
But it almost has a little bit of a WeWork feel to it, particularly that previous picture, which I think is great. You're creating a very social, casual environment for people to allow them to collaborate, which I think more and more companies are coming around to, understanding how to get people back in the office. It's really to create these kind of inviting spaces.
Exactly. And so you want to come to this. Now, we also have floors that just are, a sea of desks, because there are times when you need that environment as well. But having the flexibility to do both. And remember, I remember early in my career, the first couple of years, work is your social environment, right? And so that's where you meet and you develop really great friends, and those are the people that you go out with. And for our younger part of our workforce, this provides a great space for them to provide those connections.
What is that in the top left? Is that an airplane wheel, perhaps?
Yes, it is. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah. So some other high tech companies that have nice budgets have also done this kind of redesigned work. We've had a couple of members on the call, this call series earlier on in the pandemic from JLL and McKinstry, and they talked about some of the companies that they've supported to move in this kind of remodeling direction. But I don't think any of them had an airplane wheel included in the design. So.
No, and that's us trying to bring in a little bit of don't forget where you work type of thing. That wheel actually weighs a lot, and so the floor had to be reinforced for it. So that just a little added complication.
I do like this picture too, because it's got the area for sort of informal, casual, meeting. The round tables there on the sort of the top center, but it does also still have a conference table there on the top right. So I like the mix that this is providing.
There's kind of an interesting little thread going on in the chat here between several of the participants, Kate, just around how do you get employees into the office versus at home. And so one of our participants was saying that, leaders really want the people in the office, even though they're more productive working remotely. I'm sure you've had this debate, more than a few times over the last couple of years.
Yeah, we have. And I think that it's the way that we're trying to address this, because there are some leaders that that want and need, quite frankly, to have their teams more in the office than others. We are really focused on creating the reason for people to be there, whether it is a corporate event, whether it is a strategy session, if you will. The challenge that we're having right now is our big spaces are booked up so much that it's harder for us to get people in because the spaces are so booked up. And so, that affects a certain percentage of the folks that are coming in.
Corporate.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say some corporate real estate folks would be relieved to hear that, given the stress that is on their industry.
Exactly. One thing that I think we are all going to be dealing with is, for employees that this is their first job or, their second job, is they're learning the company and they're learning the work. So much is done by mentoring and by having that good coach. And so that's something that we have we've been focusing on our mentoring programs at United. Both, we have a corporate one and then our BRGs also have them. So you have 2 shots at a mentor at United. But that I think is really helpful. And then also one thing that we are putting back in place is when you are a new hire, you get a buddy. And so that's somebody that is either in your work group or around your work group, so that you have somebody that you can be connected to outside of just your manager.
And are you using a platform of some type for that, Kate, to try to match up, interests?
We are. It's Mentor Click, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
And so we use that as a matching.
Got it. Yeah, I think more and more companies are looking at that. How do you leverage peer-to-peer coaching, mentoring inside the organization? There's so many benefits to that. It plays really well, I think, into what we were talking about at the beginning of talent mobility and internal talent marketplace. To me, that's just another aspect of how you use your workforce to develop your employees.
Yeah, because hybrid is a hybrid work environment, and that flexibility is something that is really great from a talent acquisition or recruiting perspective. People are looking for that. Even if they don't want to use it, they like to know that they have it, right? But making sure that they are connected to the organization, that's the piece that I think we're all still trying to figure out a little bit.
Well, another piece that I think we're still figuring out is really looking at the holistic well-being of the employees. And there's been a lot of attention certainly on mental and emotional health inside the workforce, particularly as we talk about burnout. I'd be curious how you've approached this over the last couple of years, Kate, and how you're thinking about this going forward.
Yeah, the burnout, I wish that was one that we had solved. I think that just everything that's been happening in our industry, and I'm sure many other industries, it's a common theme that I'm not sure we have figured out. We have tried to provide the right tools for our teams and our leaders, whether that's online mental health options. We use a service called Ginger, which can provide some coaching and some guidance, or whether it's in extreme cases, of course, using employee assistance programs, things like that. But we've also updated, we do a safety briefing at United before every meeting, talking about, it was originally focused on what would happen if there was a fire or if there was a tornado or somebody had a heart attack. We have now added, how are you feeling emotionally today? Take a minute to know where you are, type of thing. And so being much more aware of that as leaders is something that we're trying to make sure that our team is aware of.
Tom is showing a study that we did a little while ago called Next Practices in Holistic Wellbeing, where we looked at 6 different areas of well-being, one of which we did further research into just recently. It was on financial well-being. It was pretty interesting just getting input from different organizations, how they're helping their employees think through managing their finances and thinking through other aspects of financial decisions that they have to make. I think that's something that we'll see more and more companies try to provide assistance to employees with going forward.
So go ahead.
I was just curious, Kate, if you've thought much about that, and what United is has been planning on there.
So we have a whole work stream regarding health equity, and to your point about financial well-being, I think that's one that when we had historically thought about our wellness programs, it was about the standard. Do you have medical? Do you have dental? Long-term disability. Yeah. But our leader for Total Rewards is awesome. I'm not going to give his name because I don't want anybody to steal him, but he's fantastic. And he is really focused on the whole well-being of the individual. And financial plays a lot of stress on your employees. And so making sure that we're in a good place there. Also making sure that we're in a place, going back to every action counts, being involved in the communities that we serve and having that grounding and that opportunity to volunteer can really feed the soul in a very different way. And so that's something that we encourage our employees to do. And it also brings the team together. Again, in another way to bring, so we'll have everybody come into the office in the morning, and then they'll go into a volunteer activity in the afternoon. And it's that you get some work done, you get some team building, you're doing good for the community. So all of those kinds of connections, I think, are really important on the holistic well-being. So I absolutely agree with the research that you've done there.
One of the things that's interesting about this research, because there are so many different components to well-being, is that it's hard for an organization, even one with a lot of resources, to tackle and stay on top of, say, all 6 of these areas at once. We definitely have seen in a lot of our pulse surveys over the past now close to 3 years during the pandemic, a definite surge in focus on mental and emotional health. As Kevin was just saying, now a lot more focus on financial. I think the current economy and maybe economy for the next couple of years is going to drive that. One thing we found with the original study, though, was that physical health was obviously an area that most companies had already addressed to a large extent. They have their medical plans, they have maybe gym memberships that maybe are now making a comeback with less COVID restrictions. But this came up in our Chief Learning and Talent Officer board meeting recently, where we gathered Chief Learning Officers and Chief Broader Talent Officers together. We met in person at Intuit's headquarters in Mountain View, California. And it came up this concept of burnout, which, like you said, Kate, we're all still trying to really figure out and struggle with. And I think people, when they hear burnout, they immediately think mental and emotional health, but there's a real physical component as well that I would like to see more companies start addressing, maybe circling back to testing availability for employees around things like serotonin and dopamine levels, testing for adrenal fatigue. I just learned recently that is not a blood test, that you can do it that way, but now there's a saliva test. So it's much cheaper, much easier for employees to do. And these things feed into each other, where you can have stressors, mental and emotional health, driving burnout, but then it feeds into physical things in your brain that just keep it happening worse and worse and worse. So I'm just curious if you've looked at your physical, there was a long intro to a question, but if you've looked at what you're doing in the physical health area, which for a lot of companies has become table stakes, to maybe look at things with a fresh eye, particularly around burnout.
We haven't on burnout and on the physical side of burnout. So that is a really, really good call out for the team. What we're focused on right now is with COVID, a lot of our team members have foregone some of their regular screenings. And so whether it's cancer or other diabetes, heart health, for instance. And so our initial push right now is really just getting people back on the screenings. But that is an excellent point. I think of that's going to be the next thing that's going to be a focus.
Great.
We've had a pretty robust chat going on during this conversation. So I want to thank those who have been offering some opinions and questions. Tom, was there anything in the chat that we just want to make sure we cover before we close out here?
Yeah, I think we covered quite a number of the questions. We unfortunately missed some because there have been so many that have come through. I think one thing that I don't know if we fully addressed was how is your organization handling, and maybe we already covered this, but the push to have people come back to the office by maybe some leaders, when it's clear that they can be just as productive on those days at home. A lot of people were asking about that. I feel like a lot of people in the audience today, participants on the call, are getting that. So do you just have any other tips that you can give? To me, it's like we need to be more intentional, and we need to tell leaders you need to be intentional, because if you're not intentional with your employees, they're going to push back and wonder why, and ultimately they may leave the organization over it. What strategies have you used where you've had those leaders that have maybe really, I think you said want and need, or maybe it was you, Kevin, said want and need. There's a big difference between want and need, right? There's need for productivity, and there's the sort of bias want of some leaders.
I'll just use an example of my team, for instance. Once a month, I get together our top 2 levels of management, and we have a 4-hour meeting where we spend some time on development of their skills and then business updates. And it's a meeting, I get it. But what it does is it provides that connection back for that team. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Yes, you probably, and we do have people join virtually because they're unable to join for that particular day. But there also is an opportunity for a happy hour afterwards. And that tends to cause people to want to come together and drive that. But so I think that is the best way to kind of to start this. There's always it'd be so much easier to only have to get dressed from the waist up today, and I can be home at 5 if I work from home, right? Everybody's got that, and there'll be some people that are much happier being fully remote. I get it, but I do think it's in the leader of that department or that group, at least in United, that's driving those purposeful opportunities to get together either with their own team or with other teams. And I think that's the best way to start. I see some of these CEOs that come out and say, hey, everybody needs to be in the office on this day. I'm like, oh my goodness, I just don't think that works. And it just causes a petition to be drafted and, and quite frankly, I'm not sure that any of us have with the employment situation the way it is and such low unemployment, can anybody really play that card? I mean, maybe Elon Musk can, and if there's somebody from Tesla or Twitter or any of his companies, way to go you. But I think for now, the rest of us we're working our way through this, and it's going to evolve. It's going to evolve. So
we were on that. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, one other thing I wanted to clarify is virtual is also good for being able to reach many more people than you previously have been able to reach. I mentioned mentoring before. I'm able to mentor people in other cities virtually in a way that I never would have before. And, so mentoring, there is an in-person component of it, but there's also a virtual component that I think we've all learned. It's a skill we've all learned, and we need to figure out how to leverage it in the right way.
Yeah, that's a great call out. The scalability that virtual can provide, particularly for those that aren't geolocated in the same spot. So, and I appreciate you mentioning the intentionality of bringing people together and making sure leaders are making that point and making that case. We did a study on collaboration many years ago with our thought leader partner, Rob Cross, and we very purposefully called it purposeful collaboration. And so we were on that sort of thought track way back then, and words like purposeful and intentional now apply not just to collaboration, but to all aspects of work, and when to come together in person and when not.
Yeah, and I also would say that, if your business is going fine and you're getting the right outcomes, then hybrid is fine. If your business takes a downturn and you need to, get some action teams together and things like that, there's going to be people in the office because that's how we're going to get it done. So I think that there's I think it's the flexibility that comes with hybrid. We can't guarantee anybody, hey, your work is only going to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the office. It's got to be fluid.
Yeah. Great comment to end with, Kate. I thought that's very poignant. Hey, look, I just want to thank you again, Kate, for joining us today. I love this conversation, love what you're doing at United, and want to encourage you to keep up the great work. But I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us today.
Well, thank you for flying us, Kevin, and thank you so much for having us today. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, if you need to reach Tom or I, there's our emails. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and we'll be back here again in 2 weeks. Looking forward to seeing you then.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kate. It was great.
Thank you.